Hello, everyone. This is Truby Chiavello. I'm the publisher and editor of PRIMO magazine. I'm coming to you today from Washington, D.C. It's March 25th. It's a rainy day here. And I'm coming to you today for the latest news from an Italian American perspective and news of importance to Italian Americans. And with some information about Washington, D.C., some of the events that are happening here also in the nation's capital. And I'm going to cover the dates of March 14th to today, March 25th. And, big news. Big news is happening here for the Italian American community. And the big news is that we're taking our case to the United States Supreme Court. That's the big news that was announced to us by Judge Basil M. Russo. He's the president of the Conference of Presidents of Major Italian American Organizations. COPOMIAO is their acronym. And he's been very involved in all the things we're trying to do and trying to save Columbus Day, save the Columbus statues. I've been doing this for a while, and we didn't have anybody in charge of the conference that was as impassioned as Judge Russo was, to bring everybody together, bring all these organizations together, consolidate them in this effort to save Columbus Day, save Columbus's legacy here in the United States, and to save the Italian American heritage here in the United States. So he's been seriously involved in the courts. Judge Russo, is indicative there. He was a judge in Ohio. He also has a lot of political experience. He was the majority leader of the Cleveland City Council at one point in time. I think he was there for almost 10 years, maybe more than that. So he's got a lot of good political experience, legal experience, and he's been excellent at bringing everybody together. He invited PRIMO to join his organization. I enthusiastically did that. And so we're very supportive of what Judge Russo is trying to do, what COPOMIAO is trying to do. And he gave the green light to George Bochetto. George Bochetto is the attorney of the Conference of Presidents of Major Italian American Organizations. Now, Mr. Bochetto is involved, I should say, in Philadelphia. He's done an incredible job there. He's defeated Jim Kenney, the mayor of Philadelphia, in almost everything. Mayor Kenney has wanted to take down the Columbus Monument at Marconi Plaza. There's also another Columbus Monument that was also to be taken down. But Mr. Bochetto has done an enormous job in stopping that through the courts. He's dug into the legal precedent, him and his staff, and they've come up with some real jewels there to preserve the statue there at Marconi Plaza. And he took the mayor to court also by Columbus Day, an executive order. Mayor Kenney, no deliberation. He didn't invite the Italian American community into his office to talk about, Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. He said, nope, we're going to now celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and not Columbus Day in Philadelphia. And so Mr. Bochetto took him to court saying, you can't do that. You're discriminating against Italian Americans because you're targeting Italian Americans and a holiday that they like, and you're eliminating that. Well, he took the case back in April of 2021. And last year, January 14th, this was done in a federal court. The Eastern District, the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. And the judge was Judge C. Darnell Jones II. Now, he was appointed by George W. Bush. So he's considered a conservative judge, if you will. But his ruling came down last year, January 14th, and basically just pretty much went against everything that Mr. Bochetto brought up, all the case law to support his cause. He said, no. This is not discrimination. This is free speech. Free speech on the part of the mayor and the government to say that they don't want to celebrate Columbus Day anymore. All they want to do is celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. And so the case law that was presented by Mr. Bochetto and his team to make the argument was the judge said, oh, no, that case law doesn't apply here. That doesn't work for you. It's just basically a typical opinion by a judge, about 20 pages in depth. He puts his side into place there. But the thing about it, which was, I disagreed with the opinion, of course, but what Judge Jones said was, he's basically saying, hey, look, okay, the Philadelphia now is going to be Indigenous Peoples Day in October, no longer Columbus Day. And he said, however, that doesn't hurt you. That doesn't harm you, Italian Americans, because, you can still celebrate, quote unquote, you can still celebrate Christopher Columbus under the holiday's new name. So now it's Indigenous Peoples Day. But you can still go out there and celebrate Columbus. You can still, have his boat, and you can wave a flag, and you can put on his hat and other types of things. Now, you honestly believe that's going to happen? You honestly believe that Indigenous Peoples Day, you got the city government supporting this, you got the schools, you got everybody else, they're all going to wear, headdresses or whatever it is. And you're going to let your kid go to class that day, waving an Italian flag and saying, hooray for Christopher Columbus. He's discovered the New World, it's just not going to happen. So, this kind of gives you an idea of how, detached the entrenched classes, the judges, the politicians, the people in the media, they just kind of, they work on theory. I don't think they mean harm per se, but they kind of work on theory, and so their ideas are they just fail in common sense. Now, this case, we're taking it to the Supreme Court, and what Judge Russo wants to show is that issue is going to be whether or not Italian Americans are a protected class. And first, the Supreme Court has to agree to hear it. And then Mr. Bochetto and his team have to be successful in persuading the justices, that Italian Americans should be deemed a protective class. Now, don't tell me that we shouldn't be a protective class. You bet we should be a protective class, more so than ever before. After 2020, you saw the statues being torn down. You saw the mayors, the governors cheering this on. You saw a concerted effort to take out our hero. Imagine if this was anybody else. Imagine if this was any minority group, or maybe even not a minority group. You would not have the situation as you have it. The thing we have to remember is Italian Americans, many of them, still live in these urban centers, and they still live the Italian American way of life. And what way of life is that? How could it be that controversial? Well, Catholicism, our religious beliefs, even if you're not a religious person, it's embedded in your culture. Italy proved that in a case some years back to protect the crucifix hanging in the classes of Italy. The argument was, it's not just religion, it's the religion embedded in the culture. And so the Italian American community, it's in New York, Boston, Chicago, wherever it is, usually we're the last ones to come on board the trends of politics and social engineering and all the other things that happen. So because of that, my feeling is we're targeted. We're targeted as a minority group. And because we're kind of like the only ones there, we really aren't Northern European, we're not British, Irish, and we're not obviously African American or Latino or Asian. We're kind of on our own. We do have considerable numbers. In Chicago, for instance, we have about 500,000, and that's it. We have probably that much in Philadelphia as well. But we're not the majority. And so all these other groups can come together and isolate us and push us out. And you're seeing it happening not only at the political level, but you're seeing it happening in colleges, universities, and elsewhere. So if we are a protected class, then the mayors that want to take down Columbus statues, that want to change Columbus Day, they can't do that anymore. Because if they do that, it'll be shown that they're discriminating against us. They're a protected class, and you bring a complaint to court. The judge will immediately believe that there might have been discrimination, that the reason why you were fired or the reason why this occurred was because of discrimination on the powers that be. So therefore, he's going to allow the cause of action. He's going to allow you to bring up the case. What's happening now is, if you're Italian American and you complain, they dismiss you. There's no discrimination here. You're like everyone else. You're like all the Northern Europeans that settled here and everything else. So this is why it's important for us to win this case. It'll change everything. It'll automatically, it'll make it the way it's supposed to be. If a mayor has a problem with a Columbus statue or Columbus Day, he'll bring in the Italian American community like it's supposed to and talk it out with us. And maybe we can come up with some sort of compromise. Maybe we can say, keep the Columbus statue, but we'll help you pay and help you get a statue of a famous American Indian or someone else that's of importance. And so this, I think, is very important. Indigenous Peoples Day, by the way, is supposed to be celebrated the day after Thanksgiving. And the United Nations actually has it set aside in the summertime. But if we are a protected class, you can't have these unilateral acts by these mayors only just for political opportunism to do these things. So now, we can take them to court and say, no, they discriminated against us. And the judges are probably going to agree with us based upon what the Supreme Court has ruled. So we'll see what happens. The Supreme Court has to first agree to hear this case, and then it goes from there. Now, this case was filed on March 14th, because I think it was very savvy of Judge Russo and Mr. Bochetto doing that, because March 14th is the day of infamy. This is the day in 1891 when 11 immigrants in New Orleans were taken from the jail cell. They had been accused of killing the police chief there, Chief Hennessy. They were acquitted. They were found either not guilty or there was no evidence to try them. And the mob, the vigilantes, the Italian haters there in New Orleans, stormed the jail cell, took these 11 people out, and hung them on lampposts. And they did this only for one reason only, because they were Italians. They would not have done this unless they were African American, I should say. They would not have done this had they been other ethnicity. I can't imagine they would do this if they were Irish, Scottish, Swedish, whatever it was at the time, immigrating into the country. But because they were Italian, because they were different, because they spoke with an accent, because their skin color might have been a little bit darker, this was one reason why there was such hate there. So today, we ask ourselves, what has changed? What has changed from then until today? Well, today they don't hang people, they hang statues. They hang the Columbus statue. They put a rope around his neck and they pull him down. Same thing. They're lynching these statues that were donated to these cities by Italian immigrants or their children. Modest people. The 11 immigrants who were hanged in New Orleans. You can go on our website at www.onlineprimo.com. This information was provided to us in part by the Conference of Presidents of major Italian American organizations and their staff there. And we list the names of the people who were hanged in New Orleans that day and their professions, their trade. Well, what were they? They were shoemakers. They were food vendors. They were peddlers. They were modest people. And what's interesting about that, too, is that was the first time when the idea of that Italian Americans, all of us belong to the mafia, because that was the argument that was made by the vigilante squad, that it was the Black Hand from Naples that had somehow or another corrupted the jury to acquit these people. Not the fact that there was no evidence, not the fact that there was actually the defense made the case that these Italians were innocent. No. They were mafia. They were connected to organized crime. And that's been the way it's been ever since. Doesn't matter what your parents did, what you did, somehow or another you're connected to some form of criminality, even there's no evidence, just because your name isn't involved. And that began really in New Orleans in 1891. Well, today we don't lynch people, we lynch statues. Back then, the vigilante squad, the mob, there must have been 10,000, maybe 20,000 people involved. Some of them became mayors and governors. And the New York Times supported what happened. They condoned it. So what's changed? Instead of hanging people, we hang statues. And instead of future mayors or governors involved in the mob assaults, we have sitting mayors and sitting governors cheering this on, sometimes participating in it. Sometimes they'll say, we'll tear down the statue because we don't like Columbus either. And the New York Times. The New York Times condoned what happened in 1891. Well, when Judge Russo and the Conference of Presidents of major Italian-American organizations wanted to place an ad defending Columbus from these false accusations that were made against him. They wanted to run an ad, a full-page ad, in the Wall Street Journal, in the Washington Post. This is paid for, mind you, and in the New York Times. It was only the New York Times that forbid to run the ad. The Wall Street Journal ran the ad, and the Washington Post ran the ad, but the New York Times wouldn't. So we're back to square one. Nothing has changed. And this is why you, me, everyone has to stand up. We have to fight. We can't be complacent anymore. We have to advocate. A lot of civic organizations out there. And if you think this is not going to touch you, think again. This is the mindset that's out there. The assumption is that Columbus is a villain of history, and if he's our hero, we must also be villains. I mean, how bad is it? Well, let me give you an example of how bad it is. I have a reader from PRIMO who sent me this this little newspaper here. It's something you pick up on your grocery store. You can tell that the Remax. You have a Remax ad here. He's trying to sell properties in the back here. It's also another Remax ad. Inside it's homes for sale, right? You're shopping in the grocery store. Maybe you want to move out of your house. You pick this up. And November 2021. This is in Tawaka, New Jersey. History of Thanksgiving. This was written by I don't know who he is, Henry M. Holden. And History of Thanksgiving. It's probably the only article that's going to be in this newspaper. I'm thinking that probably they're going to talk about grandma's apple pie or Uncle Mort's stuffing. But no, he goes into what he believes is the history of Thanksgiving. And it's here in the 8th paragraph. He says this: Native Americans and many other persons take issue with how the Thanksgiving narrative is represented. He's writing this. And he writes, Christopher Columbus, Juan Ponce de Leon, and Hernando de Soto are 3 of the many Europeans who plundered the Native American resources and kidnapped many into slavery. Columbus wasn't in the slave trade. He had nothing to do with this. He never set foot, by the way, in what is today the United States. The closest he ever came to it was Cuba. He discovered North and South America. He discovered the islands that are there in the Caribbean. He set foot in Central America and even in Venezuela. But he never set foot in the continental United States. None of the Indians here, the Native Americans, were ever hurt by him. He was dead long before you had English settlers that came here. The reason why they don't like Columbus and the Columbus statues is because it's allegorical. Well, if it's allegorical, it can go both ways. If you see it as allegorical, that he represents the persecution of Indians, and you want us to accept that, then you have to accept our belief that he's allegorical of the pride we have in our Italian American ethnicity, and he's allegorical to symbolize our immigration here to the United States. So if you want to tear down the statue because you believe it's symbolic, then you have to also agree to us not to tear the statue because he's symbolic to us. This is what's happening. This is what should be discussed between the sides. This is what the mayors and the governor should come in and help mediate. And what should be done is you should have the statues there in the park, 2 statues, maybe one for us, Columbus, and maybe somebody else for the Native Americans or what have you. But that's not the way it's done. Instead, the governing bodies are trying to make us out as the bad guys, and they're moving ahead in what they want to do with regards to Columbus Day. And then the big story that happened related to this was in Maryland. Now, to the Italian American civic groups out there, let me just say this before I go talk about Maryland. You got to step up. You got to defend Columbus and our Italian American way of life, and you got to support those who are defending him, because it's going to happen to your group. I can see how they could maybe argue that a Sons of Italy lodge is racist, is because if it's a religious affiliation, they could argue that it's homophobic, misogynistic, whatever. Just a matter of time until they move into that direction, because it's about America. It's about how the history of America is considered evil, bad, and this is kind of where it's coming from. It's very wrong. It's very sad, but that's what's happening. So, people like Judge Russo and so many others out there who are fighting this. It's not just about Columbus. It's about our American way of life, what we've known. The country that could come in its place would be something much worse, I think. And in Maryland, what we saw happening there is, and this is another thing too I want to impress upon people here, the Italian American community. Get on email, get on social media. These things happen very fast, and you have to react to it very fast. And what happened in Maryland was there was a proposed bill last week, House Bill 446, that's still in committee, to change Columbus Day into Indigenous Peoples Day. This spreads like wildflower. I mean, it's almost like pollen. It's all over the place now, and just all these people are just adopting to this trend, this bandwagon of Columbus hate. And thank you to Dr. Albert Mara. He's a good friend of the magazine. We're good friends. He's the president of the Sons of Italy Lodge in Baltimore. And he informed me about this, and I immediately got on PRIMO's website and social media sites to push back on this proposed legislation. This was proposed by Marlon Ampry. He's a delegate there in Maryland in the House, and Jocelyn Pena Melnick is the committee chairperson. And the person on our side to keep Columbus Day in Maryland is Nino Mangione. Now I'll have their email addresses here. When we ask that you email them, we tell them, hands off Columbus Day. Keep Columbus Day in Maryland. If you want to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, do so with what the federal government has advised, which is to have it the day after Thanksgiving. That's the day of designation. Have it then. But do not take away Columbus Day. So in Dr. Mara's letter, and we posted it in onlineprimo.com along with some others as well, he makes the case. He says that there is 268,000 people in Maryland who are Italian Americans out of 6 million people total, and there's about 17 million Italian Americans countrywide. This is the statistics that we all use because this is from the U.S. Census Bureau. And I bring up this point because I hope to one day prove what I believe is the Census Bureau grossly undercounting Italian Americans. I do not believe we have only 17 million here in the United States. Common sense tells me that must be wrong. I'm one of 7 kids in my family. We've had 7 children. My friends who are Italian Americans, they have 7 children, even more than that, 6 brothers and sisters. That's true of so many Italian American families. They're very large. They have kids. Their kids have kids. This spreads. Italian immigration to the United States is one of the biggest in history of any ethnic group. And considering the size and scope of families, I just do not believe that we're only 17 million. So we have to look at something like the Census Bureau, and we have to be conscious of it. And we, you and me, and everyone out there, it's Italian American, has to challenge it. So this is why I take my hat off to Dr. Christopher Benetti. He's leading the way in this, to challenge the Census Bureau, to try and designate us under a different heading. I think right now we're designated as Caucasian or European. Designate us as Mediterranean and include people of the Mediterranean there, that they can, that if you're going to fill up the census form, you can mark down Italian under a better heading. And so I'll try and put a link there that you can maybe write to the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Apparently they're in charge of this, of the census, of maybe changing the census criteria and allowing a better representation of Italian Americans. You know, statistics, it's like what Disraeli said. You know, he said there's three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. And it's just how you input the data. It's just how you work it. And it's political. I know that for sure because we had experienced this in Washington, D.C. here. We had a Mayor Anthony Williams, who said that, you know, we don't have 500,000 people. We have more than 500,000 people. But the census refused to accept that. And you could just, common sense told you that we must have had a growing population because there was more traffic. That was tougher to get an apartment. It was just all the things that would tell you there was a growth in our population. And, you know, he did a pretty good job. He cleaned up the government. You had the control board that came in to clean it all up, and things are improving. But the way the Census Bureau looked at it was political, because this is the 90s, 80s, the 2000s. Everybody's moving out of the cities, right? The trend is to leave the cities, right? It's there. Everybody wants to move to the suburbs, right? You know, Northern Virginia is growing and Southern Maryland is growing, but Washington, D.C., or this old city, urban decay, crime, whatever, no one wants to be there anymore. Never mind that this is back in the early 2000s then. We're going to talk about the way D.C. is today, which is different. But in the early 2000s, the city was very functional. So it was believed we had more developers, more development. But come on, we have to be growing in population. So he challenged the census report. He complained about it vocally, publicly. And they decided, okay, we'll review the numbers. And sure enough, they came back with, no, we're not 500,000, we're almost 600,000 in population. So that's kind of what happens. And so my belief is that with Italian Americans, we're no longer the in ethnicity. We're no longer the in people. When the media talks about other people, they talk about the new immigrants from different parts of the world. We're old news. We're not part of the new zeitgeist or the narrative. So this also drifts down to the government and other activities to prove this is true. And I believe our numbers are undercounted. So I'll have a link there that you can look at to voice your opinion about U.S. Census data, about how to change the U.S. Census form. And the theme is how our government is not too oriented to Italian American causes. And you see this happening in other parts of the world also. And there was news in Italy about this as well. It's not even, the governing class isn't really even governing anymore for the good of your city or the good of your country. They're governing for some sort of ideology, or even some sort of ideology that's part of a federation, if you will. And this is what's going on in Italy. In Italy, you had the new prime minister, Mario Draghi. Super Mario is what they called him in the news meeting. Now, I think he's going to go down in history, probably the worst prime minister in Italy, because he was only there for a couple of years. And he was there just to take the money that was given from the European Union to Italy because of COVID-19 and spend it. But he had been a former member of the European Central Bank, and everybody thought he was this superhero because he figured out how to do interest rates. You know, he would post the new interest rates based upon help with the supercomputer and other things. I think at one point in time, interest rates in Europe got down below zero. I don't know how that's possible, but that's what it did. And they named him prime minister, not by election. He wasn't elected by the people. It was the representatives of parliament that appointed him based upon the president pushing him. And he was there. He didn't do much. And then the war came. Last year, you had Russia invade Ukraine. And the European Commission were going to bring Mother Russia to her knees. You know, they had all these sanctions against Russia. They sanctioned people. They sanctioned a gymnast, for instance. I think they sanctioned Vladimir Putin's daughter. And the big sanction was against oil and gas. We're not going to buy any more oil and gas from Russia. Now, Russia is a commodity-rich country. They would ship their oil and gas to Italy. Western Europe has no oil and gas. And Italy refines oil and gas to be one of the major distributors in Europe, but they don't drill it. So they got to get the oil and gas someplace else, and they got it from Russia. Well, now, since we're not going to get this commodity, this raw material from this big country in the northeast, we have to do something else. And there was liquefied gas, and they wanted to turn the liquefied gas into regular gas. And they did that by saying a company in Italy named SNAM, S-N-A-M, is its acronym, is partially owned by the Italian government, that we would buy a regasification boat, a ship, that could take some of these vessels that have liquefied natural gas, and this ship would come up with these boats and turn it into natural gas, regular gas. And the regasifier vessel, there's not too many of them, it's called the Golar Tundra. With taxpayer money, Italy bought it for $350 million. And it had to park it someplace. If they want to turn liquefied gas into regular gas, got to do it in the harbor someplace. And they chose a fishing village in Tuscany named Piombino. Piombino is a fishing village of about 30,000 residents. They had no idea that this ship was going to come to their harbor. They woke up one day in the summer and found out this is what's going on. They immediately took to the streets. They protested. They demonstrated. Now, this community, for some reason, somebody put a steel plant there. It's reminiscent of something you might see in the Jersey Shore or in the Eastern Shore in Maryland or Delaware, someplace like that. The steel plant closed. So now you had a bunch of residents out of work. And instead of them going towards a manufacturing, dirty economy, they decided to embrace the sea. And the first fish farming was going to is taking place there in Piombino. And they decided to focus on the tourist trade. And what they do is they ferry people from Piombino to the island of Monte Cristo. You might be familiar with the book, The Count of Monte Cristo, written by Alexander Dumas. Just to digress a little bit, we had an article about the Count of Monte Cristo in PRIMO. And it's a story of vengeance. A person goes to jail on false charges, a false testimony with his friends. When he escapes the jail, he finds a treasure on the island of Monte Cristo, off the coast of Italy, and he goes back to France to avenge those who sold him out, falsely accused him. And this was a true story, actually, that took place in Italy. It took place in much of the story happens. It takes place in a prison, and in the book, it was a prison off of Marseille, but in real life, this was the Fenestrale prison in the Piemonte region of Italy, right outside Turin. It had been a fort, and it was turned into a prison under Napoleon. When he invaded Italy, he arrested people and threw them in that prison. And then afterwards, if you're a pro-Bonaparte, pro-Napoleon, they've been deposed by then, you're arrested and you're then sent also to this prison. Now, this prison is famous for being, I think, second to only the Great Wall of China. They have a large wall there, and today it's of course it's no longer a prison. It's a national park. People will take their bikes. You go mountain biking. Well, they do that on the stairs. So that's a side note about the Count of Monte Cristo. And the people of Piombino, get back to our original point, would ferry people to and from. They ferry tourists to this island. So this is what they're trying to do. And so when they discovered that, a petrochemical plant is going to anchor off your coastline. Now, what they do in this boat is they have to turn liquefied gas into real gas. And they do so by heating the water. So they're there on the ocean. They're going to heat that ocean water around their vessel. And a main ingredient is chlorine bleach. So this ship has tons of containers of bleach there. Now, you have to ask yourself, what could go wrong? Of course, this thing could blow up. And if it blows up, people think it could be half the size of an atom bomb, really, with all that fuel aboard. Heating the water, I'm sure that's going to have a bad effect on the aqua life. The fish farming is nearby. And bleach, I'm sure that's going to leak in the water. So a lot could go wrong here. And the people don't want it. They do not want this boat. And they demonstrated, and they demonstrated, and they demonstrated. They took to the streets. And the summer went by. This vessel, the Gola Tundra, did not appear. Fall, winter, New Year's Day, doesn't appear. But on March 21st, it appeared. It was there, ready to go. And people could see it from their windows in Piombino. So they're now having to figure out how to get this boat out of there. And they don't seem to be listened to at all by the representatives of the parliament and by the new prime minister, Giorgia Meloni. And this is all happening, mind you, because of the war in Ukraine. A place that Piombino, the people there, have absolutely no connection to. No historical connection at all to what's happening 2,000 miles away. Whole different part of the world for them. And yet they are having to pay the price with this existential threat that's existing right off the coastline. Now, the media in Italy is not reporting this that much. And the government isn't paying attention to it that much. But we are. We were notified about this, and we've been running articles about it as best we can on our website and elsewhere. And we stand with the people of Piombino. We'll do everything we can, PRIMO, to help them in this instance, because it's unfair to them, it's unfair to their community, and it's not necessary. So my hope is we'll see how it turns out. We'll monitor the story, but my hope is that they'll send the Gola Tundra to the tundra, get that boat out, get that boat out of there. We'll see how it goes. Now, that's the theme, really, just the fact that the governments, the people in charge, are not paying attention to the people. And we see this happening here in Washington, D.C. Since I'm here in Washington, D.C., you see a lot of things happening here in the nation's capital. It's good for me to report on. And for me personally, we're seeing a real policy change with the mayor and the government and the city council. It just boggles the mind. Remember how I was talking about how I thought the census reports here in Washington, D.C. in the early 2000s when the city had turned around. Well, now it's going in the opposite direction. Dante's favorite number was 100. Well, unfortunately, here it is March, we have 100 homicides. We have 100 murders that have occurred in 2022, and we're not even done with the third month yet. If this keeps up, this rate, we will be back the days of the murder capital of the world. From 1988 to 1997, we were averaging over 300 murders per year. We're not a big city compared to New York and some other places. And we're going to go back those numbers. We had the murder rate down to below 100. and the place was far safer. And now we're moving into the direction of going back to large scale numbers of homicides, of murders. Much of that takes place in Ward 8 and elsewhere. And this is according to the website DC Witness. And their records are going to be different, of course, than what the government has, the Metropolitan Police Department. And it's affecting everybody. Crime is affecting a lot of places that were turning the corner. Chinatown was a community that was turning the corner in Washington right before COVID-19 hit. And now we're seeing crime from back there, and it's bringing that community down. And it's important to me because that's where my parish is located. St. Mary Mother of God Church. They're located on 727 5th Street Northwest, right there in Chinatown, right next to 8th Street. I have a lot of love for that church. The priest, parish priest, Vincent de Russo, is a very nice man. And it's indicative of the way the Catholics are, right? This is a church that was founded 150 years ago by German immigrants. And then it stayed there, and Chinatown spread. And so it's a German church. We have Chinese parishioners now in Chinatown. And I would say the majority of parishioners are probably African American, and Irish American. And yet our parish priest is an Italian. And that's very Catholic, I think, in the demographic elements of it. And so we're trying to make the area safer. The priest, to his credit, is always. I'm gonna have an article on Father de Russo soon to come on our website and in the print magazine. And he's trying to make it a safer place. He's having to deal with city council members that are in favor of decriminalizing crime, particularly in pot smoking. The smell of marijuana is everywhere. And we're told that if you decriminalized it, that would reduce the crime rate. People would not want to buy weed. They would want to go to the dispensaries. They wouldn't want to buy it off the street. That hasn't happened. Crime rate's gone up. People are smoking pot from dealers right on the street. And what we're finding out now is a lot of the grass is laced with fentanyl and some other more powerful drugs. So that's causing a new wave of drug dependence that's happening. And that's leading to crime. There's a halfway house nearby where the church is, and we're seeing drug dealers there. And so he's trying to fight the good fight there to try to make it safe for the parish. And story of St. Mary Mother of God Church is happening to a lot of churches. We used to have the Latin Mass there, and what was it back? I think it was July of last year. Pope Francis had come out with a decree basically saying, if you're going to have you can't just have the Latin Mass. You can't have the pre-new Mass. You have to have permission from the bishops. And we were like one of the only churches, one of 3 churches in the DC metropolitan region that had the Latin Mass. I really didn't attend it that much because that happened. That Mass occurred early Sunday. I tended to go to the 7:30 Mass. I'm a late bloomer, I guess, on Sundays. But a couple of times that I did attend the Latin Mass, I enjoyed it very much. So, what harm could the Latin Mass be? It's just the way it is. I think because if you attend a traditional rite, that somehow or another you could be a threat to society. Somebody in the FBI, by the way, and I have my rosary beads here. I got this from my mother. Somebody in the FBI thought that people who said the rosary were considered domestic terrorists. That was something that had come out a couple weeks back, which is preposterous, of course. But this is kind of what the mindset is. This is why if you're relatively pious, even, I mean, not even really pious, just relatively pious Catholic faith, and that's embedded in your Italian American culture. That's part of being Italian. That's a lot to do with the art, the history, our heritage. Some people out there think that you're unwelcomed. You're a threat to them. It's crazy because we're lower numbers now, and so now we are the minority. Like Father de Rosa said, we're the avant-garde. And this is very true. So they turned the Latin Mass to the Franciscan monastery, and that dropped I think we've lost about half our parishioners. We're trying to bring it back. We're working hard to do that. We've had meetings and that sort of thing. And there is a rally that occurred this week to try and to walk from Arlington, Virginia, all the way through Washington to bring notification to try and appeal to the cardinal, the bishop, to let these parishes retain the Latin Mass. I don't see why not, but this is where we're at. We're in a different world. We're in a world where a lot of people in power have a vision. It's no longer them for our community, for our state, for our municipality, for everyone who lives there. It's something else. It's an ideology, perhaps, that what they appeal to, a larger confederation that they want to appeal to. So therefore, they're affecting us as we live here in the United States. So this is a challenge. This comes to Columbus, other things to do with Italian Americans, our Catholic faith, a lot of things. And so I'm reporting on it. I'm trying to keep up on it, do the best I can. And I want to thank you for listening. I'll have more news to come. And I want you to please subscribe to my channel, to PRIMO's channel. Like this video if you do, please. And if you have any comments, please feel free to express your mind. I'll be happy to discuss it. And I'll have links to what I talked to you about before. I'll have links to the Conference of Presidents of Major Italian American Organizations, what's going on in Maryland, and also this local parish I attend here. If you're moving to Washington, D.C., and you're looking to attend a church that's more in the traditional line of things, but this might be the mass for you. I find it very appealing to go there at 7:30 on Sunday. It's very nice, and it's a wonderful church, St. Mary, Mother of God in Washington, D.C. Anyway, I want to thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking with you again in the future. Thank you, and God bless.